Good day all. So in our previous session we have discussed about how we can create a API specification or API schema for uh, the actual implementation that is required. So we can even call it as API schema. So API schema is basically a resource representations and what are the resources that we can expose from the API and what are the different types of requests that we can send and what will be the responses. Today, we are going to enhance our service by restructuring, organizing, and reusing of the components. So it can be any of the API. So we are going to follow the same steps. So first of all, we will review our existing API specification. So go to any point platform, and within any point platform, we have a RAML version and the description and title of the API, and we have suppliers resource for get method and also post method, and we have a supplier number resource which is having an operations or methods like patch and delete, and it is having a information to provide by using the query parameters which are required or which are optional, and also this get suppliers method is accepting the headers, and we have mentioned which are mandatory and which are optional. So this kind of information we are providing within the API specification. Now we are going to make a change like this suppliers information. We wanted to apply these headers for all the methods and resources. For that we need to add this under all the methods. So I'm going to copy paste. We have added under post. We will just verify. So we have a headers, client ID and client secret, and source system is optional. And for patch method also we are going to add it. And for another method, delete method. Now we have added these headers which are needed for all the methods and resources. So in we are adding this code at each and every method. We can verify. For supplier number we are going to check for patch method, and even for patch method also we can see that headers are needed for client ID and client secret. So by adding these lines of code at each and every method, it is going to increase the number of lines, and also it is a duplicate code. It is the same client ID and client secret, but we want it at all the methods and resources. So instead of creating duplicate code, we have to reduce the code and reuse that particular code. That is the one thing. And also we need to organize the files, or we need to organize the code instead of placing at all the places. We need to organize the code, then only we should be able to read all the resources within the file, and we can uh, make a new change very faster. So today first we will add the traits. So traits means it is a metadata information like query parameters or headers information or URI parameters. So for our get suppliers resource, we are having a query parameters and headers. So instead of adding at each and every method, we are going to add a traits information. So above the suppliers resource, add a new line and type traits. So for these traits, we are going to give a name common traits for the whole API. So we are going to mention what are the common traits. I'm copy pasting this information. I am going to add one more traits information. This information is for get suppliers. So for get suppliers, we have a query parameters. Now we have added two traits. And if we needed any additional traits, for example, if there is a different types of parameters we wanted to send to post method or patch method for the suppliers resource, then we have to create a separate traits with a different name and also with the fields that we wanted to add. For example, along with get suppliers, we also wanted to add additional metadata for the post suppliers resource as well. In that case, we are going to create the trait name as post and then suppliers. It can be anything, but if we follow this kind of standard like method and the resource name, then we can reuse it in a better way. So I am going to mention I need a headers along with common traits like client ID, client secret, and source system. I also want to accept another parameters like whether I wanted a source channel and type is string and also required to. And I also want one more information like target system information where I wanted to send this information. Because it is a post operation, I must need a target system information. So I have to mention required to. Even though if we are going to remove this required property, then the target system by default will be considered as a mandatory or required field. So as of now, we have added three traits information, common traits, which are going to have a headers information and get suppliers, which is have a query parameters, and post suppliers traits, which is having headers information. And along with these headers, if we want to add any query parameters, then we can use a query parameter. And here I wanted to provide an additional information in the form of query parameters for post suppliers. So I am going to provide a information status type string required false. But this query parameter is not mandatory for the post suppliers. If it is provided, then I am going to consider it and then I have to process it accordingly within the API implementation. But here we are just going to mention whether we can able to send the information or we are going to validate the schema before accepting the request. Now for get suppliers information, instead of having these headers, we are going to use as a common threads. So I am going to remove this information and we will verify the get resource here. Suppliers get. And within gets, we have query parameters here, whatever is available, and we do not have any headers information. Now I am going to remove the query parameters also. So whenever we have removed the query parameters from this get method and suppliers resource, we are not able to see any of the query parameters and headers information in the review or documentation in the mocking service. Now we are going to apply the traits information, metadata information to this particular method. So we have to add a new line before the description and use the keyword is. So if you see here in the shelf, we have types and traits. Provide is keyword, and within the is keyword, we have to provide the information. What are the traits that we wanted to apply for this method or operation? I want to apply common traits. So we'll just review the information. while adding the details in the RAML, you can always verify the information on the documentation. So if if you have any issue, then you can easily identify. So we have added a headers information. Now I am also adding get suppliers. So I want to add query parameters and also headers information, metadata details for this get method of suppliers process. So in this way, we have defined it once at one place, and we can always come here and we can add new traits if needed. So in this way, we are going to organize and restructure our API schema. And our next process for the post resource, we are going to remove the duplicate code. So here we have a headers information. Remove this information and add a is keyword. And by adding the is keyword, we can mention the traits information in two ways. One is by adding a information by using multiple lines of code with a dash. Otherwise, you can have a array of square brackets and provide the information. We want common traits and also post suppliers information. So if we want to add multiple traits information or multiple values, we have to use square brackets and comma separated. We will verify post. Here we have headers information and also query parameters is needed. It is going to be status information. If we remove these post suppliers, we are not able to see that status query parameters information anymore within the documentation. We are going to apply the same thing for patch supplier is, and I want only the common traits for the patch suppliers, and for delete also I want only common traits information. So in this way we can reuse our code, save the changes, and after saving the changes, our functionality or the resources are not modified. We are just making them more reliant and reusable manner. And we will verify another information. So now we have understood what is the traits and how can we define the traits and how can we reuse them by defining once. Next thing we will discuss about types. So basically type means what kind of data that we can send to that particular request, like it is a payload information. So it will represent payload, body, request or response. So what kind of data we can send. Now we will review this in the code API specification. So for get suppliers information, we have application JSON. It is a media type, and also it is going to return the list of suppliers which is having a information or fields names as supplier number, supplier name, is active, address, and state. So I am going to remove this information from the get suppliers resource, and I am going to add a new section. So add a section like types. So within types, I want to mention the type name. So it will be get suppliers request. So we have added a name, and under the name we have to specify the schemas like items, whether if it is an array of information we want to provide for the get suppliers request type, then we need to provide items, or if we want to provide an object kind of information, then we need to choose properties. So for now, we want to return list of suppliers. So I'm going to use the information that was provided earlier. We have defined this as a get suppliers request. We can even choose the name as just get suppliers. So it is different. Type is different and traits are different. Even though it is having the same name, but it is defined under two different sections. One is type and another one is traits. So type will denote the data types and traits will metadata of the resource or the request. So here we can add that particular type now. So under suppliers resource, under the application JSON, add a new line and provide the types and traits. So here we are going to use type. Type will be our type name. So copy this type name from line number 6 and then provide it in the type. Now we can see whether the type is available or not. And we can see that what are the mandatory values, array of information, and we can see what are the required fields and all. I am going to make a small change in the types for get suppliers. So I am removing this address and it is going to make the field as a mandate. And we can also see that it is reflected on the documentation. Address is a required field and it is throwing some error. Let us check the project errors. It is showing like should have required property address and providing an information square brackets 1. That means it is the second object. So within example, we need to add the address information to make this schema as a valid. I am adding a sample value and we will just verify the project errors. Now the error is clear. In this way, we can define the types. So now I am going to add another type for post suppliers. I am going to remove all the types information from that particular resource and moving it to the above section. Remove this one and our type name should be, it should be exactly under the same level like get suppliers. It is an information for post suppliers and we wanted this information as an object, so we have to add as a properties directly. And we are also going to define one more property for the types. It is the patch supplier. So our patch supplier will have supplier name and is active. So I'm going to copy this data, reuse, and I have copied to patch supplier details. And we are also going to define one more type, delete supplier. So our delete supplier information, one second, we do not want this headers because we already have added the is tag and added a comment rate, so we don't need to repeat this one. And if in case we have added multiple traits information and it is having the same key name, then it is going to give a priority for the traits that are defined under that particular method. So for example, if there is a traits defined under the resource level and a trait defined at the method level, so it is going to take the priority at the method level. If it is having a different key names, then it will consider both the value, both the keys. So for delete supplier, we do not have any request body, so we don't need the type. So under application JSON, add a type for post and type name is post suppliers. We will verify post operation here. So our request is having this kind of information and what are the required fields for it. We are also going to add information for the patch. I have removed the traits information from patch because it is duplicated. And here I am going to add a type. Our type name is patch supplier. And if we observe, we have a response body also, and it is having examples. So first I am going to remove this property from here, and I am going to add a type for these particular properties. So our property name for this will be response message type. Since it is common, I am making it as response message type. And properties are message and the value is string for this property. I am going to use this type and I will replace at all the responses. So wherever it is applicable, like for post response, we wanted a property message. So I am going to use this property, mention type and then response message. Copy this one, remove the value from here and provide the type information. From here also remove the existing type information and add a new one, response message type. We'll just verify it once. So we have types information, get suppliers and also post suppliers information. So in this way we can even verify the types information on the documentation. I'm going to verify the suppliers patch information and here we will check for the response type. So this is a response message type and it is going to have a message string required. And if any new type is needed, then we can add it in the particular section. Instead of going and adding at each of the method, we can derive at one place. So till now we have seen the traits information and types information, how we can define it and how can we use it. Now we are going to create the examples. So in our API specification, we also have the examples. What will be the example information that you can send for that request. And if we see, we have examples at multiple places, like get suppliers is having an example, post suppliers, and also patch supplier information, and also response messages are having a information. So instead of defining this within the main RAML, we are going to organize in the separate files. So I'm going to create the new folders here. On the left side, there is a files, and files we have a plus icon. Click on plus icon, create a folder, and create a folder name like examples. And within examples, we are going to add a new file. So click on new file. Here we need to provide what kind of format and data we wanted to store. I am going to use other method for now, and I will mention get suppliers response.json. So this is going to represent an information of get suppliers response. Create. So I'm going to main RAML and I will use this example. I will remove this example now for not having any errors. So to format this data, select all and then right click on it. So you will have an option like format document. So save the changes and come to main RAML. And we will just verify for the get suppliers resource. We just have the request information, body information. We do not have any of the example here. So it is showing a default example with the empty string values. So we are going to represent an example, and this example we wanted to refer from another file because we have created a response JSON file. We are going to copy the file path. So click on the vertical dots here and copy path. So within example, paste that path. And we also need to use include keyword here. So it is going to refer that particular file path. And we will verify the get suppliers information now. And if we observe, it is having the right example that is provided within that particular JSON file. In this way, we can refer the other files information by using include keyword. I am going to remove this example for post suppliers and I will place it in a separate file. Instead of using a other file now, I am going to use a RAML 1.0 and we are going to create a named example now. So for that, select the type as example and name the example like post suppliers request.raml. And whenever we are going to add a named example, it will have a RAML version and also named example as the type. And here we are going to provide the information. But in these named examples, it cannot accept the JSON information. So we need to provide the details by using a YAML or RAML format. So we need to provide the information by using a YAML format. So YAML will be key and values pair. So our values will be like, I am removing this objects notation and move all the properties to the left side. And here we have to provide the values without commas. Save this information. And we are also going to create another file. Remove this example now, which will represent the information of supplier for patch method. Example patch supplier example. Remove the comma, save the changes. I'm going to remove the patch information and here provide a include keyword by using exclamatory mark, and then you can choose the path copy by copying the path, or you can choose the values from the shelf. So click on examples and it is going to provide, if there are any subfolders, it will provide the subfolder information and the files. So we need to provide a patch supplier example here. And in same way, we are going to represent the example for post example and then use include keyword, and within examples we have a post suppliers request.raml. You can just verify if it is providing the valid information within the documentation or not. It is have a supplier name. Just change the details here. Post suppliers. So you can observe that changes are reflected in the documentation. We will just verify if it is having any other hard-coded values here. So we have a supplier deleted successfully message, and we need to move this out of from the main RAML, and we will refer from the file. Use if you want to directly have an information within the RAML, you can create a RAML API format example file. Otherwise, you can choose the other format and you can directly create the .json or .xml files as well. I am going to choose other, and this is the information for delete supplier response example .json. Format this. Since it is a JSON format, we need to provide the values in double quotes, the string value. Likewise, you can create other values and other duplicate files. So click on duplicate here, and instead of having this name as delete, provide the patch supplier response example. And here, instead of having deleted response, we wanted to mention that supplier updated successfully. And we also want a post supplier response as well. So create one more file, duplicate post suppliers response example.json. Supplier created successfully. If you want to create a named example, you can create that named example also. So we will just have a difference for that. I'm going to create a new file from the RAML. Post suppliers response.raml. I'm not giving example, and within here and within this file we have a named example, and I'm going to have a message, and that message is like new supplier created successfully. So we have two kinds of messages within RAML and also response example JSON. So we can always refer the examples that are needed. So for delete, I am going to refer the example include, and you can copy the file path here, copy path, and then use that example. And for supplier updated successfully, use the include keyword and mention the file. So from here, use the patch suppliers response example. And for suppliers example, since for the post suppliers response, we wanted to define multiple response types, then you can choose the examples. You can choose the examples instead of example, and you can provide that response examples. Response 1, and for response 1, include the example file. So our example file will be response example JSON file, and another file it is going to refer the RAML file. And within RAML, I am also going to add different values, and along with this supplier number, I want to return a supplier number also. So you can have the supplier number 135. So this is a new supplier number created. You can verify that information. So we have added examples at all the resource methods. So we can verify that. For delete, we are going to check. Here we have supplier deleted successfully, fine. And I'm going to verify the post information since we have added multiple examples for this. So within the responses, it is a response 201 and it is going to represent two types of messages here. Response message types and examples are response 1 and response 2, and it is having an information with message and also supplier number. So you might receive an response in the success scenario either with the message and also with the supplier number also. So the consumer application will make sure that they are going to read the values from the supplier number also if it is having any value, so that they can display that new supplier number on the front end applications. So it is just a format. I mean, we are uh, letting them know like this will be the different types of responses you will receive for this resource methods. So we have seen examples, sample data or payload that can be sent to request or sample data or payload that can be received from the service, or we can even call it as a response payload. We have seen this with named examples also, but only difference is that we can directly have the examples with .json or .xml files, but named examples will always should be .raml files. Now we are going to discuss about the resource types. So resource types means, as of now we have defined one resource here, suppliers, and under suppliers we have multiple methods like get method, post method, and patch and delete under the suppliers supplier number. In this way we are defining our code, what kind of data it is going to accept and what are the traits that it will accept and what will be the responses that it will send. So for example, I want to add one more response type here, 400, and 400 body application JSON. So for 400 bad request, type is like response message type. It will provide a message and value and example. So I have not defined these examples in the examples folder, so I'm directly going to add it here. You can choose a pipe symbol, and if you want to add a message and in the new line you need to use the pipe symbol, and our message is like message and then bad request. So if we have defined multiple resources at multiple methods with multiple response words, then the file will become very large and it will be difficult to read the file. So instead of that, we are going to create an resource types. So resource types means it is a type for the particular resources. Just like we have a types for that particular responses or a request body, we are going to define a type for the resources. So what kind of methods that the resources will accept and what kind of responses that resources can represent. That information we are going to add under the resource types. So resource types is like, so resource types means it will represent the methods, payload body, payload responses, and also traits that we can define per a particular resource. In this way, we can define these resource types and we can reuse it. I am going to define a resource types under the API specification above the supplier's main resources. Whenever we are going to define the resources, we need to add all the sections, traits and types and also resource types information above the actual start of the resources. So I am going to add resource types and we need to provide an resource type name. So I want to define only a get method under one resource type. Then I need to use a resource type name like it is only read-only collection. Further, define the name and under the name we are going to provide the method, which method this particular resource type will represent. And it is going to add a traits information like it will accept common traits and also if you want to add any additional traits then you can provide that information. Get traits and it is going to provide a responses. Responses is like 200 and 400. So it is going to provide a responses 200 and body application JSON. And under application JSON, we want to define the type and also example. So for type, we can mention it as get and resource name. For example, I am going to mention it as resource name. So it is going to consider get as a hard-coded value, and after that, this value, whatever we are representing within these double angular brackets, it is going to be a dynamic value that we will see in action. And also I want to add an example. So for example, I am adding a get and example I am adding it as get example. So whenever we are going to use this resource type, we have to provide all these values that are presented within the double angular brackets. Otherwise, we are unable to complete the API specification and it will throw an error. So this is one resource type. And another resource type, we wanted to define another methods like within this resource type, we are going to provide an information like it is going to create a resource and also provide an information as well. So read create resource and it will have a get method. Along with get method, it is also going to provide a post method. We have mentioned a is keyword to access the traits information, and along with that we also want to provide the body. So we have defined two resource types. One is for read-only operation and another one to read and create a operation. So we have created two resource types and we will use them. And here I am going to create a new resource by using suppliers, but here I am mentioning SS caps. So it is going to provide resources like suppliers and also small suppliers. So for these suppliers, I am going to use a resource type. So to use resource type, we need to use type and we have to mention the type name. So we have read only collection and read create collection. If we want only a read operation for these suppliers, we need to use read only collection. Otherwise, if we want both read and post operation, we need to use read create collection. I'm going to use read create first. So whenever we are going to use this read create, whatever these values that are dynamic, we need to provide them for this particular resource wherever we are going to create as a resource. For example, get traits means if we don't want to pass any of the traits information for this one, then you have, for example, if you don't want to pass any of the information to this read create collection for the get method, then you can mention nice we have to create one more traits information with none, which will accept query parameters and also headers without values. So we are defining none, but it is having query parameters and headers, but there are no mandatory fields. I'm going to use none here. And then, okay, here we need to pass it as a post traits and use the post traits. So for post traits also, I don't want to mention anything. If you see here, whenever we are adding these values, then the error is clearing from the errors. And I am going to use the information like post suppliers here. So resource name is suppliers. So we need to provide a type that can have a value like post suppliers. And if we see here, we have that information. Get suppliers is available and also post suppliers. If this value is not defined, then it will throw an error. So I'm going to make a small change. Yeah. I'm going to provide this information with small s. So whenever we are providing this information small s, that means this resource name for this particular type will be come as post suppliers, this value. And this post suppliers is not available within these types, and that is the reason it is throwing an error. I will just make sure that I'm going to copy this information and I'm going to create one more type here and mention this with small s. And now observe the impact. Resource name is suppliers and the error is removed from the post operation. And if we are going to add the same information for get suppliers, the error will be removed. Get suppliers. So likewise, we can create the types and methods, and we are using them by using the resource types. Now we want to represent an example. So for post example, we want to use post. One second. For post suppliers information, we have a post example. Where is that? Post, post suppliers request dot example. So copy this path and then provide it here. include and then path. And within this get example, I am going to provide the information for the get suppliers. So in this way, we have added a suppliers information and we are getting the response. For example, within this suppliers information, if we don't want to represent it as a array of information directly, and we are going to define this as a object. So define the object information. We are going to remove this items property and we are directly adding the properties under the get suppliers. And since it is an object information, but we want to return this example as an array of information which is having get suppliers array records. So to add this, we have to make a change within this particular resource type to represent this get information as array. So get resource name and add a square brackets. So that means it is going to get that particular object and it will convert that into a array of objects. So in this way we can mention and we can easily make a changes or enhancements within that particular section. And if we want another resource which is going to work only for the get method, then you can use the read-only collection for that particular resource and we can implement the resource. If we see here, we have a get suppliers and also it is having all the required fields and all. In this way, we can create resource types, named examples, and traits information. So now instead of having all this information within the file, I'm going to extract this information and I will create a separate file. So I have created the data types folder and within this data types folder for each and every types information, data type information, I am creating a new data type file. So to create a new data type file, we have to create on that particular folder and create a new file. And here we have to select the data type. And we need to provide the file by using RAML extension. So I'm going to extract this information and I will create the files. I'm going to pause the video for some. So I have made all the changes. So I have just done created folders, multiple folders for organizing the files. Like we have created a traits folder, data types, examples, libraries, and resource types. So within traits folder, we are storing the information that is related with metadata or query parameters and headers information. Just verify the information. So within common traits, we have extracted the common traits information and storing here. So to create a traits file, click on this plus icon and click a new file and select the file type as trait so that you should be able to create a traits file and we can provide the information whatever is needed. So this is a common trait and we will verify get suppliers information. So for get suppliers information, we need to provide the query parameters. So we can remove this get suppliers keyword here and we are going to refer the query parameters within this file. And another traits information, none. So here we just have query parameters and headers and we are not mentioning any fields for that. And another traits information for post suppliers. Now we will verify about the data types. So to define any data type for the particular request or response, we need to use a data type file format. So click on plus icon and here you can choose the data type and you have to provide the RAML file read and you have to provide a RAML extension for it and we will just verify the information. So here we don't need to use the keyword and we can directly provide the information whether it is a properties. If it is object, we can directly provide properties. If it is a array information, then we have to provide the items. In this way, we are storing the data types within the data types folder for all get supplier and get suppliers information, and also for updating the supplier information, patch supplier, post supplier, and resource message for everything. And we have storing the examples within the examples folder. And if there are multiple versions and multiple resources, you can even organize it by creating the folders for each and every resource, and you can also maintain the versions as well. Yeah, here we have delete suppliers response and also get suppliers response, patch supplier examples, patch supplier response example. And we have defined named examples as well as JSON examples here. Named examples are with data RAML extension. And we are also defining library files. So within the library files, we can create the information as we are going to create in a main RAML file. But here we are going to mention it as a library, and we can define the resource types because if we wanted to cross verify this information, and also if we need to create any separate fragments, and if we wanted to refer this within the multiple APIs, then we can create these library files or fragment files as a separate project also, and we can refer in multiple APIs. As of now, I have created only for resource types information and provided the information for read-only collection as well as read-create collections. If it is needed for types and everything, we can still add here. And also I am creating a resource types, and to create a resource types, we need to select the file type as resource type. And within this resource type, we don't have to give the name. We can directly create the methods that are needed for this resource type. So our resource type is suppliers read create and suppliers read only. So we have created two different resource types. So within main file, earlier we were having the types and we have defined each and every properties, query parameters, headers, and also the examples and traits information, resource types information, everything in one file. But now with the restructure and organizing manner, we are referring the files from the different file locations and using the include keyword. So in this way, we are still able to represent the same resources and same methods, and yet we are achieving the API standards with the best practices, and we are achieving the API design document specifications as well. And we will just verify. Here we have the traits, and also resource types are created. To refer these resource types, we need to refer the resource types information. And to refer the traits, whatever the traits that we have created under traits folder, we are referring all those files. And for types information, we need to refer the data types. And for examples, we cannot create any of these kind of sections. We have to refer them directly within the resource methods itself. So like this, we have to refer whether it can be a RAML example or JSON example. Or we can even create the XML examples also. And now if we see here, we are able to refer the supplier's resource with the two different methods with a simple line of code. And below line of code will also represent supplier's information with lower case, and it is having get, post, and for supplier supply number we have patch and delete, but it is having more lines of code than the above one. So the benefit will be like, if we are going to use resource types, then we can define all of the main things like what will be the responses and codes, everything within that resource types. And within resource types also, you can still refer the types and examples by providing the values like dynamic values by using angular brackets. And if there are any new changes, we can still able to directly go and make a change and we can refer that files. Now we are going to observe one more difference. I am commenting these resource types and I am going to use the libraries. So we have defined one library here. I am going to refer that library. So to refer the library, we need to use a keyword like uses, and we are creating a type, a use type here, and we don't need to use any include keyword for the libraries. We can directly refer that. Our file name itself is library. If you want, you can rename it. And to refer these uses and the resource types that are defined within this library RAML, we have to use it like, I'm commenting this. So we need to refer using this use type. And within this use type, we are still having this read create collection. So within this within this custom resource types, we are going to refer the read create collection. And if you want to create another collection or another, so if you want to use that, we can still use that by using a read only collection, and we can implement the resources. So this will be very useful, and we need more practice to create these files and refer the files, and also to test it by using the mock services. So before publishing these assets, we have to make sure that we are testing these services and we are getting a expected results or expected mock samples or mock responses within the services, so it will be easy for the implementation. So we'll just review what we have done, and yeah, we have enhanced our service to use and restructure, organize, and reusing the details. We are using the traits, types, examples, named examples, and resource types information, and we have extracted all of this information from main file and created subfolders and sub files and referring them within the main file. Thank you.